Hi, friends. Once again, I'm Nate Sala, Discipleship Specialist at Life, and with me is Pastor Paul Gotthard, Senior Pastor. So, Pastor Paul, the more things change, and boy, they're changing day by day at this point, the greater the reality is that we are just not in control. How do you think people tend to react to that reality?
Yeah. A statement I've been sharing for a number of years is control is an illusion. And I mean, the idea that we can really control things ourselves is one that we like the idea of it. And quite honestly, in smaller ways and maybe for temporary periods of time, people do have a sense of control. For example, somebody might make the decision to control what they eat and they go on a specific diet, or they make a decision to exercise regularly, and it's like, okay, this is in my control. I can do this.
Yeah.
Or maybe they might even make a decision like, I'm going to pursue one of my career objectives, or I'm going to save for retirement. Those are things I can control. Those are things I can do myself. But you can see, even within the last several weeks, that those types of decisions that we think we're in control of, we find out really quickly we're not nearly as in control as we think.
That's right.
So somebody who might say, I want to control what I eat, and then they go to the grocery store and everything they would normally eat is not sitting on those shelves anymore. I think there's a lot of low-carb, keto, gluten-free diets that are being shot right now because at a time like this, it's not an issue as much of I'm going to control every facet. People are just like, we need food, we're going to find food, this is what we can do. Same type of thing when it comes to exercise. Somebody who has made that decision, maybe as their New Year's resolution earlier in this year, every day I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to exercise, and then they shut down the gyms. All of a sudden, you're not in control of that decision as much as what you thought you were. Or for that matter, somebody who's saying, this is going to be the year I achieve all of my career goals. And yet there's been a number of jobs where people have lost their job, or maybe they're on temporary furlough, or for that matter, even retirement. Some of the plans that people might have had of retirement savings all of a sudden is now in question at this point. So when we've said over the years that control is an illusion, what I mean by that is ultimate control from a human perspective is an illusion. However, God has ultimate control. That's a part of why we take a lot of joy, and there's confidence in the fact that even when we can't control everything, He absolutely can.
Yeah. And I'm sure that certainly these times would not take the Lord by surprise, or even His word.
Sure.
So in light of that, then, what does the Bible have to say about peace?
Yeah, the concept of peace is one that for believers right now, we need to look at this in a completely different perspective than maybe what we would at other times. So say at other times, peace sounds like a really good thing to an already wonderful, good life. Like if somebody comes home in the evening, they're looking forward to having a little bit of peace and quiet. Not necessarily that peace is a game changer in how they operate throughout the day. I just did a message recently entitled Simple Peace. And in that particular message, I address peace from God's perspective. And one of the things that I think is really important for believers to look at times like this is our peace does not begin with our circumstances. From a biblical perspective, peace begins with a person, and that person is Jesus Christ. And then from that relationship with Christ, He now brings peace into these other circumstances that are happening in our life. So there's some other things that we can get into in that in just a few moments. But I think that the first thought of, on a biblical perspective, what does the Bible say about peace? I would start right there and just say, peace begins with a person. It's not about our circumstances.
Well, I'm sure this is a radical departure from the way the culture thinks about peace. And perhaps even some people that do come to church every Sunday. So one of the things that I do notice from the culture a lot is that it suggests that we should go inward and we should find our own peace. What does the Bible have to say about that, though? Is it actually possible for us to give ourselves peace?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and it's one that if we don't address it clearly from a biblical perspective, even some of the biblical ideas can be misconstrued if they're viewed through a secular lens. So, for example, the idea that we could give ourselves peace also comes from the idea that we can control our circumstances. So if we go back and we begin with the control part and say control is an illusion, then when you move forward and say, can we give ourselves our own peace, or can we do things that make for peaceful mind, peaceful thinking, that would also suggest that we can control the outcome, and we can also control the things that might rob us of peace. So even from that side alone, if we were to just pause there, there is a peace that you can experience when you're following biblical teachings, when you are pursuing Christ. There are things that we can do as believers that aid us and walk us down a pathway towards peace. But the idea that we can experience peace in and of ourselves, we can create it, we can control it, we can push away the things that might rob us of peace, that is a false assumption. The world is constantly changing, and since you don't know what's coming even an hour from now, much less a month from now, the idea that we could somehow control that to create peace is also another part of the illusion.
Boy, I'm wondering if we could just take one more moment and just talk about flipping that paradigm. So I'm sure a lot of people, it's really simple what you just said. The problem is that a lot of us just don't do it.
Yeah.
It's not our default to do that. What would you suggest for someone just starting to flip it around, taking our eyes off circumstance and putting it on Jesus? What would you say?
Listen, I think that is a piece that has been the motto and the rally cry of this church for years. The statement that I have shared over and over again is that everything God desires to do in and through your life, He will accomplish out of the overflow of your relationship with Him. So if we just pause there and say, how do we gain peace? Go back to that statement. Everything He desires to do in your life, which would be bringing peace through your life, sharing peace with others, would come out of the overflow of our relationship with Him. It always begins with an intimate relationship with God. So the first step for anybody who's wanting to reframe this would be to go back and say, am I reframing it by pursuing Christ more? If we miss that first step, everything else is going to begin to fall apart. So in the message that I just shared, I kind of addressed the fact that peace begins with a person, that is personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and then peace is continued as we are walking in obedience with His teachings, with His commands. So I want to go on to my notes here for just a moment, just to kind of show how that comes out.
Sure.
We actually addressed that topic out of Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 through 9. But in that message, I described that peace does not begin in chapter 4. Rather, it is the culmination of working through different pieces that lead to a peaceful mind. And these other things had started back in the previous chapters. So here's what we found. In Philippians 1, it focused on a single mind that can pray in faith. Philippians 2, it addresses a submissive mind that comes to God with our needs. So let's even pause there. If we're not bringing our needs to God and sharing those concerns with Him, then talking about having peace of mind down the road, we've missed it. Because a step in doing that is that we are bringing those needs to God, pursuing Him, and we're literally sharing our deepest concerns with the only one who can truly help. Then Philippians 3 talks about a spiritual mind that shows our appreciation to God. And then it's in Philippians 4, it talks about a secure mind that looks to God and it dwells on the right things. So in Philippians 4, verse 7, it tells us that the peace of God will guard us. But then it tells us in verse number 9, the God of peace will be with you. So in those two verses, we find that the peace of God and the God of peace are both promised to Christians who, according to what we found in that text, live with a grateful attitude, they have consistent prayer, there's disciplined thinking, there's biblical habits, and you can go back into the message and you can see how we broke down all of those pieces. But it begins with that pursuit of God.
Yeah, that's so good. And there's so much here. I think maybe we should do a part 2 to this.
I think so.
To this video. So on the next video, I'm going to ask Pastor Paul whether it's possible for people to have peace in the wrong things. So stay tuned for that one, and we'll see you next time.